Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Today I've got another batch of terrifying encounters, ranging from Dogman to unexplainable cryptids. Before we get into these terrifying encounters, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. I also started a GoFundMe page a while back to help raise some money for urbex, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting equipment. So far, I have an SLS cam, an EVP recorder, and some trail cams. If that's anything that you're interested in helping with, that link is also in the description below. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with these terrifying cryptid encounters, shall we? Today's first possible Dogman encounter. To give some background as to how this story came up, my family and I were talking about supernatural occurrences and strange creatures that they had encountered. We are a Christian family, but take this story to be the truth. This is a second-hand experience that my grandma shared with my mom many years ago. This happened when he was an 8-year-old child in Mexico, roughly 60 years ago. My grandpa grew up in the hillsides in Mexico in the 60s. It was very rural during that time, and he lived on a large property with a few neighbors. His family didn't have much money, so he would tend to his neighbors' cattle, who owned the property further up the hillside, to earn a few pesos. His neighbor would usually accompany him in rounding up the cattle nearing sunset to bring them back to the barn. One day, though, my grandpa said his neighbor got sick and stayed inside instead of accompanying him. This wasn't too out of the ordinary, as he'd been doing this for a while and was trusted. Nearing sunset, he started herding the cattle and walking them back to the stables. When he did a count, he noticed that one of the cows was missing. Going back to look for it, he headed down the hill when he said he heard some rustling and snapping in the dry cornfields. Thinking that the cow had somehow gotten lost in the field, he called out to it. Emerging from the cornfields was what he described as a large black dog, and says he was overcome with an overwhelming sense of dread. He immediately turned to run up the hill and started screaming at the top of his lungs. He said he turned around to look behind him, and the dog had started running bipedally after him. His neighbor had heard him screaming and immediately opened the door to let him in. I'm not too sure what happened after that, except that he told his neighbor and his family what had happened, and his parents no longer let him go back up there to tend the cattle. A detail that stood out, according to my mom's retelling, was how vivid he saw this dog start to run bipedally after him. After she finished telling the story, she told me she couldn't remember the name for this folkloric creature. The shape-shifting details stood out to me, so I showed a picture of the Dogman and a skinwalker, and she pointed out the details described by my grandpa were closer to a skinwalker. My dad then remembered the name, and he said they called them Nahuals in Mexico. Looking them up, I saw a striking crossover between native and Mexican folklore. Between these creatures, they are shape-shifting shamans that transform into animals, most often large dogs. Additionally, what is striking is that they don't see these creatures as something mythical or outlandish, but take them to be the truth and are supposedly well known about in the area. Other strange things have happened on his property, but I don't know all of the details yet. Today's second encounter is a possible Hellhound or Dogman encounter. The occurrences I'm about to explain happened in the suburb of Central Ohio. This has been happening within the last 2 years, and I know I'm not crazy because others have seen them. The first sighting, driving home from a friend's house around 3 a.m. We both see a large dog in the median, not highway, and go, "Oh shit, a dog." We turned the car around to see if it might need some help, but it vanished completely. Next sighting was traumatizing and prominent in my memory. Best friend and I, at the time, are at my dad's house. We are walking onto the golf course that the house is on the edge of to smoke a joint. I see several large black figures in the distance, maybe 5 to 7 of them. I just wrote it off as I was stoned and tired and my vision was playing tricks on me. That is, until they moved. They all got closer to us and one lets out the worst screech I've ever heard. It was like a guttural screech hiss. I know I will never erase this memory. We both look at each other like we are about to die and bolt towards my dad's house. I tripped in the grass and I swear I thought I was going to die at that moment. They were like the size of wolves but pitch black. No animal native to Ohio is like that. The third sighting, I'm driving home late, probably midnight-ish, and I see a huge, distinguished wolf-like creature in the medium of this empty road, ragged, staring at me, pitch black, long fur. It looked like it was feasting on something. It just left such an awful feeling in my body the second I recognized it. The last sighting is what really validates these sightings. I was at my house with a friend, waiting for another friend to come. The friend calls my other friend and tells her about something he had just saw on the side of the road. I didn't even hear the whole conversation, but I knew exactly what he was talking about. Nick is a friend who never told me about his experiences, as we hadn't seen each other in a while. He gets to my house and describes exactly what he had seen several times. Huge, feral, pitch-black dog, the size of a wolf, matted, gross, unnatural. He said seeing it sent shivers down his whole body and just felt unsettled. I told him everything that I had seen previously, and he was freaked out as well. I never believed in anything otherworldly, but having so many experiences is freaking me out. I don't like it at all. I did some research, and the only thing that I could find in this part of the area could have built on burial grounds. Does anyone have any insight or similar experiences? I know this sounds insane, and I can barely believe it happened to me as well. That shriek I will never forget. Today's third unsettling encounter. I just got home from a road trip, and I've been thinking about something I saw and can't make sense of it. Maybe some of you had seen something like this. My wife and I were driving on Highway 97 near Mount Shasta, California. It was about midnight, and we were driving through a heavily wooded area without any street lamps. We rounded a corner when I saw something fast and low to the ground dart across the street about 50 to 60 yards ahead of us. I saw glowing animal eyes and the body of the shape of a big dog. We saw animals the whole road trip, and, like usual, I asked my wife if she saw it to confirm. The body wasn't 100% clear because our headlights hadn't reached the section of road yet. When we got to the exact point in the road where the animal crossed, we looked to the side to see if there was anything there. There was a man dressed in army fatigues walking down the road. He didn't look at us, he just kept walking. It was pitch black, and he didn't have any type of light with him. He was only lit up by our headlights. We both got full body chills when we saw him because we were expecting to see an animal. I know that area has a magical, mystical history with a lot of unexplained sightings. This is unlike anything I've ever experienced before, and we are totally creeped out. Still can't make heads or tails of it. Today's fourth encounter is a possible Bigfoot encounter. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, completely rural. I lived in a valley community. My house was surrounded by forests and mountains. When I was 14, my dad started to hear strange sounds coming from the hills behind our house, knocking sounds as if something was hitting a tree, and an occasional inhuman yell. My dog, a rough and tough outside boy, was very drawn to those hills at random times. His ears would shoot up and he would quickly run to the forest and stay there for a while. Him going up into the hills wasn't uncommon, but at the time he started acting particularly suspicious about them. And don't worry, nothing bad happens to him in this story. Anyway, the noise started to become more frequent. My brother and his friends used to hunt for ginseng up in those hills, and they heard the noises as well. Except much louder because they were more near the source. One day the noises wouldn't stop. They progressed louder and louder, and there was growling. My brother was pretty much sick of it by now and wanted to know what the hell was going on. So he was wondering this for years. It's evening time, about to get dark, so he takes a flashlight and a shotgun and heads up into the hills. He sees a creature that looked like what he said could be a Sasquatch. It was tall, broad shoulders, wider than its torso. He more so saw its silhouette because of the darkness that came. He chased it off, came back to the house, told me what happened, and drew a sketch of what it looked like. The noises had stopped after that day. They never came back. A couple of weeks later, a new Bigfoot special came on TV. A witness sketched the alleged Bigfoot looked identical to the one my brother had made. To this day, we are still convinced a Bigfoot or something lived out there. My dad named him Sassy, short for Sasquatch. Today's fifth and final terrifying and unexplained cryptid encounter. This happened in Oregon, about 20 to 50 miles east of Sweet Home in the mid-90s. I was a child, about 10 years, when this encounter occurred. I forget about it until I recently had a dream that sparked my memory. I was camping with my family in the mountains outside of Sweet Home. I was doing what all children do when camping and exploring the area, generally following the nearby river, when I came upon a section of river with two steep banks separated by a ravine cut by the river. I vaguely remember looking across to the opposite side of the river and saw a couple of small, pale, emaciated-looking people with pointed ears climbing up the steep embankment on all fours. And I remember wanting to jump across to try to get a better look, but being really creeped out at the same time. It was very surreal. Even now, it's a hazy memory. I don't remember them wearing any kind of clothes, but they may have been wearing some sort of loincloth. I didn't see their faces because I only noticed them as they were moving away from me and facing away from me. No hair or fur whatsoever. Reminds me of the movie with the monsters in The Descent. 5 terrifying yet very interesting encounters. The first encounter was, wow, I'm going to have to do a little more research into that one, huh? Definitely a creepy encounter. The poor kid, he just wants to make some money and goes looks for a missing cow, and there's this bipedal large dog chasing him. Definitely not anything I want happening to my kids or myself or any of you guys. I'm going to have to do a little more research about that. The second encounter, I think you got yourself a Hellhound on your hands. I'm not really sure. Definitely something you don't want to mess with. Good luck. The third encounter, I'm kind of mixed. Dogman, Skinwalker. I hate to say it, but werewolf. I don't usually like to use the term werewolf unless I'm talking about a European Dogman encounter. But there's been so many encounters with these creatures wearing clothes that who knows? I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere and there's this guy just walking in pitch black on a road. After you see some sort of wolf-like creature spring across the road. Definitely creepy. The Bigfoot encounter. Your brother's badass. If he really went out with a flashlight and a shotgun. because we all know that there's been many hunters and loggers that have gotten stones and boulders and logs thrown at them, cornered, and almost killed by possible Sasquatch encounters. The last encounter, wow, I'm thinking fleshgate, crawler, something that you don't want to fuck with. I'm definitely not going to Sweet Home, Oregon woods anytime soon, because I don't want to see some sort of emaciated, pointed-eared, naked creature crawling up the hills on all fours coming at me. Unless I have my AR-15 with me. Even then, I don't want to see it. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed these encounters as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. And with that, guys, I bid you farewell.